along with probably most people.
Say it with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So you're telling this committee that the Biden administration, while they were letting all of these unaccompanied minors into the country, and as we've talked about today, they weren't keeping track of them, they issued these kids a hotline that they could call if they had trouble with the sponsor family that they were put with. And you're saying that 65,000 calls to this hotline designated to protect these kids went unanswered? Is that what you're telling this committee?
Yes, sir.
Wow. That is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Do you know how many staffers the administration assigned to answering these phones and helping these kids?
One.
One staffer? Any idea how many hours a day this staffer was working?
No.
Maybe that's why there were 65,000 calls that weren't answered from these little kids, huh? Unbelievable.
Yep. It is absolutely unbelievable. And we're going to dive into a little bit about that tonight. But first, you had many places you could be tonight. You chose to be here with me. And for that, I'm forever grateful. Thank you and welcome to another edition of the Douglas Ducote Show. You know, regardless of where your political line is, Democrat, liberal, Republican, conservative, regardless of what your race is, white, black, Hispanic, regardless of what your religion is, Catholic, Baptist, Buddhist, Muslim. One thing that we should all have in common is a desire to protect children from pedophiles, from sex trafficking, as well as protect women from the same things. We have the Jeffrey Epstein debacle that's going down. More and more coming out every day. It's not looking good for a lot of different people. But one thing that the news media seems to gloss over is the horrible conditions that the previous administration put on women and children coming across our southern border. For 4 years, they left the borders wide open. They stopped ICE from doing their jobs. They pretty much handcuffed the Border Patrol, turned them into babysitters, and they let literally thousands and thousands of unaccompanied children to come across the border and then turn them over to many different organizations that just stepped up and said, we will help, without vetting them properly. Or the children had a phone number written on their arm, which we'll discuss tonight as well. And they just called that number and they said, oh yeah, I'm the person that's supposed to take care of them. And they turned them over to them without doing proper vetting. And then over 80,000 children we can't find. The Biden administration lost track of them. Furthermore, as you just saw in tonight's opening clip, they set up a hotline and gave it to the children to call if they run into any problems. What do you think happened to that hotline they gave the kids? Do you think the sex trafficker that took them let them hold on to this hotline phone number? Or maybe they tattooed it on their other arm. You couldn't make this shit up if you tried. The previous administration is guilty of sex trafficking children. That is my firm belief. It's absolutely horrifying. It's disgusting. And I do believe that all those that were responsible for what we're going to talk about here in a little bit should be held accountable, especially that piece of garbage that was in charge of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. What a low-life scumbag that guy was. But first, let's talk about what's happening, or what did happen in New York in the past several hours. A lone gunman identified as Shane Tamar walked into a Midtown Manhattan office building yesterday and opened fire, killing 4 people before turning the gun on himself and taking his own life. The 4 people killed in the shooting were identified as a New York PD officer, a Blackstone executive, a security guard, associate at Rudin Management. New York City Mayor Eric Adams said Tamar appeared to take the wrong elevator bank inside of 345 Park Avenue when he carried out this attack, adding that it appears as though he was going after the employees at the NFL. The motive of the shooting still remains unclear tonight, but several things have surfaced, and you may have seen some of the videos. One being that this young man played football in high school. There's an interview that he gave after a game that's going viral. And he had some type of a mental illness happening. And he was concerned about what is known as CTE, which is chronic traumatic, and I know I'm going to get this word wrong, encephalopathy, encephalopathy, which is basically what football players get and boxers get it as well. MMA fighters can get it from repeatedly too much hits to the brain. And he was blaming the NFL for not doing enough for this. So it appears that that's what he was going up there to do. He came from Las Vegas, drove all the way across country to New York to go up there to shoot and kill people in the NFL office, but instead came out at the wrong floor. New York Mayor Eric Adams provided the new information. Investigation details regarding the firearms used in the Midtown Manhattan mass shooting as well. We have discovered through our investigation that the weapon that was used was purchased by an associate of this guy. Adams said during an interview yesterday, and many other, he did a whole bunch of interviews yesterday. He also purchased the firearm that was found in the car by using a concealed carry permit that was received in Nevada, the mayor said. Adams said 2 teams of detectives are going to Las Vegas to identify and question the associate that helped purchase these weapons. And they're also going to conduct, obviously, raids of his home and his acquaintances and so forth to get to the bottom of this. You know, it's bad enough that what happened yesterday is a horrible, horrible tragedy. But what makes it even more sickening is those on the liberal left and the media that try and turn it into a race game. You know, they're so quick to want to point the finger at white men. And it's not just them, it's members of Congress and the Democrat Party, for instance, Alejandro Mar and Rashida Tlaib and AOC, saying that white men are the biggest threat to America's security. To listen to them talk, you would believe that the KKK is active in a well in every city across America right now, burning and lynching black people, burning crosses in their yards, dragging them by their neck behind cars, hanging them from trees, burning down churches that black people attend. It's absolutely sickening. Well, leave it to CNN to jump into the middle of this cluster crap. CNN is now being ridiculed all over social media for reporting the latest New York shooter suspect was possibly white. Even as they're showing on the screen a picture released by law enforcement that clearly showed he was African American. Reporting on the shooter on her show, Erin Burnett out front, CNN host Erin Burnett asked, was his face visible? I mean, do they have any idea at this point who he is? And she asked this as she's looking at the picture, and so is everybody else. CNN's chief law enforcement officer, who was the guest, an intelligence analyst by the name of John Miller, who's white, replied, they do not know who he is. They know he is male and possibly white. He's wearing sunglasses. He appears to have a mustache. And that picture has been distributed to every police officer in New York City, particularly has been sent to the phones of the search teams inside that building because they encountered a group of people. The first things they have to figure out is that individual among these people, hiding among these victims, or pretending to be an office worker. Burnett then repeated Miller's claim that the suspect was male and possibly white. Well, they're showing the picture of the guy, who's obviously a black male. When Miller made his statement, photo from surveillance video was already circulating on the news. Every outlet out there had it. Social media had it, showing that he was clearly not white. An hour later, the suspect was identified by New York PD as 27-year-old Shane Tamura, Tamura, a black male, not a white male wearing blackface. When a criminal suspect is black or brown, why does the media, especially the mainstream media, either refuse to report their race or wrongfully report they're possibly white? Questioned Turning Point USA founder Charlie Clerk, who then went on to say, gee, it's almost like they have an agenda. Well, Charlie, sir, they do have, that didn't make it. Try that again. They do have an agenda. And that is to point the finger at white people every chance they have. Even the white Democrat members of Congress up in Washington, D.C. point the finger of everything that goes wrong in our society at white men, especially white veterans. It is something that it's like something ingrained in our society that is truly despicable, disgusting, and just all out vile that they continue to go down this road, trying to make people think that, you know, everything from the past is still in the present. Everything is not what it seems. Does he look like he's white? Can anybody look at that picture, especially a journalist or a former law enforcement officer who's a law enforcement expert for CNN and a white male, come to the conclusion that he's possibly white? Yeah, you can't. It is an agenda. It's an agenda to turn the cameras and the ideology, the facts, away from where they're truly at. And that's a shame. Now, more to come about the shooter in the coming days. Maybe by Thursday's show, we'll have an update, more information they have found. In the meantime, please keep the victims and their family and friends in your thoughts and prayers. What a horrible tragedy that should have never happened. If we were just spending the money on mental health in this country, the money that we wasted, that Doge found on absolute crap like DEI programs, not only all across America, but across planet Earth, maybe we could make some headway and fix some of these problems, or at least start addressing them and helping people, helping them get, whether it's therapist or medication. Maybe invest some of it in pro-law enforcement instead of defunding law enforcement, to start looking at, well, just think how many people in the past 10 years that went out and committed a horrible crime like this, to find out that either they were on law enforcement radar and law enforcement didn't do anything about it, or they should have been, because all the red flags were there. Now let's go back to this border crisis BS. Thousands of children, thousands, vanished during the Biden border chaos. Condemned to the conveyor belt of rape and abuse. It's It's been exposed that the conveyor belt of rape and abuse of vulnerable migrant children in the U.S. under President Joe Biden's border free-for-all, now being cleaned up by the Trump administration. Following federal border czar Tom Homan's recent revelation of Miranda Devine's Pod Force One, podcasts and children have been trafficked across the country with little oversight before Trump took office. Whistleblowers have exposed how the terrifying scheme worked. Between 2019 and 2023, are you ready for this? 448,000, I'll repeat that, 448,000 unaccompanied minors were encountered by the Department of Homeland Security, according to its own figures, who were then transferred into U.S. custody. Many of their children, some as young as 5, arrive with little more than phone numbers scribbled on their arms or clothing. And most of it were scams, as we're finding out now, as these children are being rescued and the people that we handed them to and didn't vet are being arrested. Perpetrated by cartels who saw the Biden lax border policies, which also saw 8 million attempted to cross into the U.S. during his time in office, per official figures, as an opportunity. The smugglers would drop off kids at the border. Customs and Border Protection couldn't do anything with them. They had to give them to the Office of Refugee Resettlement within 72 hours. Once they get there, non-government contractors, private companies, religious organizations, and just concerned citizens step forward. Look at the paperwork and say that they're the sponsor. This is where they should be delivered to, us. Morgan Latreat, a former Blackwater contractor and Army intelligence officer, spoke out and said, but they weren't confirming that it was a real person, real family member, or addresses that were given. And as we're rescuing some of these children and arresting these people, we found out that some of these addresses that the Biden administration's Homeland Security took down as just facts turned out to be to storage units or strip clubs. Yeah, gentlemen clubs. The officers were initially handing the kids right back off on the other side of the smuggling rings in the United States. Another twisted smuggling scheme was exposed in 2024, as you may remember, when Homeland Security investigators busted a ring that was bringing kids under age 5, some sedated with melatonin gummies, over the border. Smugglers tried to sneak the kids from Laredo, Mexico to Laredo, Texas, by using the birth certificates of actual U.S. citizen children, according to a release by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They then dropped the kids off at stash houses, which passed them further into the U.S. In one of those cases, Vanessa Valdez, 23, pleaded guilty to smuggling one child after being caught. 5 co-conspirators between the ages of 20 and 47 also pleaded guilty. Sources confirm to the Post that such schemes were common across the entire southern U.S.-Mexico border. Once in the United States, unaccompanied or smuggled kids face grim fates. It's sex trafficking, child labor, exploiting the families. Loretta, who blames the government-funded organizations and private security companies to which the unaccompanied children were handed off to, and the Biden administration for allowing that to happen without vetting them first. American taxpayers are essentially paying for child sex trafficking. It's a conveyor belt. It's all about using private military companies and nonprofit and religious organizations to shift accountability. But the DHS owns the entire supply chain. Once they're out of federal view, the Department of Homeland Security has plausible deniability, as we saw happen with the Biden administration, for anything that happens to them later. A Border Patrol agent with over 22 years of experience who asked to remain anonymous because he fears for his life, backed up the claims, telling the Post anyone could claim they are a parent or relative of the children and there were no way to verify it, or they didn't even attempt to verify it. All anyone had to do was go off the unverified claims by the children themselves or the phone numbers. They weren't vetted. We were giving these children to be sex trafficked again. Right here in our own country. Sponsors were previously able to present some foreign passports, but now they must present a U.S. form of identification or proof that they have a pending green card to even come close to having a child released to their custody. They must also have proof of income, such as a pay stub or tax returns, as well as agreeing to be fingerprinted. That's a no-brainer that the Biden administration didn't do. And if they claim the child is part of their family, DNA testing to prove it. The number of minors who have slipped through the cracks is alarming. Department of Homeland Security of the Inspector General said just this past March that 233,000 children had not been issued any paperwork by the Biden administration and no way of locating and where they went. Also noted that many of those children had been released to so-called sponsors that were never vetted. However, it also notes that further 31,000 unaccompanied minors had an incorrect commercial or no address for their sponsors, and further 43,000 did not appear for scheduled court dates. Of course not. The Department of Health and Human Services puts the number of migrant children it could not reach and are unaccounted for, and they don't know where they're at, other than the last time we saw them, they were released to somebody here in America at 85,000 children. Listen to me, Democrats and liberals. If nothing else I've said to you about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Biden administration rings a fucking bell in your head, this shit should. Our United States government was involved in sex trafficking women and children, and 85,000 children are unaccounted for, and we don't know where they're at. And thankfully, because of this administration, we have an agenda with law enforcement to find these kids and rescue them and arrest those that are destroying their lives. Tom Homan said ICE is prioritizing tracking down the missing children, but described harrowing scenarios that agents have encountered, such as how they found a 14-year-old pregnant girl living with an adult man as well as minors forced into servitude on ranches and chicken farms here in America. Investigations into migrant child labor have turned up children working in slaughterhouses, sewing tags into T-shirts, doing woodwork, or working in the fields for products destined to be sold by the best-known brands in the U.S. all across America. Many unaccompanied children have to send money to families back home or to pay off those who smuggle them into the country and use fake IDs to secure work. Numbers are hard to quantify, but some have suggested up to 75% of those who enter the country unaccompanied end up working as child laborers. Meanwhile, the Trump administration also canceled a contract with Southwest Key, the nation's largest private care provider for unaccompanied children. The company had received nearly $3 billion from the Biden administration to operate 29 shelters across Texas, Arizona, and California that can house up to 6,350 children at a time. However, it was subject to a lawsuit last year by the Department of Justice that alleged that from 2015 to 2023, Southwest Key employees subjected children to severe and pervasive sexual harassment, including rape, solicitation of sex acts, and inappropriate touching. The complaint details over 100 reports of abuse, with employees accused of exploiting children's vulnerabilities, language barriers, trauma, and isolation in countries where they had no family. One chilling incident in 2022, Southwest Key report included the lawsuit described a youth care worker at Casa Franklin in El Paso, Texas, who allegedly repeatedly abused a 5-year-old girl, an 8-year-old girl, and an 11-year-old girl. The 8-year-old claimed the worker entered their bedrooms at night and touched their private parts and threatened to kill their families if they spoke out. In another incident detailed in the complaint at Casa Chainville, Texas, a teenage girl wrote her alleged abuser, "He can do whatever he pleases because he is a shift leader. He's the boss." He also claims he raped her and demanded nude photos. She also claimed. Southwest Key failed to constantly correct its practices and prevent harassment to continue throughout all of these inaccurate interventions. The Department of Justice complaint claims. In response to the complaint, Southwest Key said it does not present an accurate picture of what the organization does or the level of care it gives to vulnerable youth and children. However, Trump pulled the plug on its funding. The company was forced to furlough 5,000 staff members. And thank God for the men and women of ICE who have arrested recently 214 illegals that were child sex offenders in Houston, Texas. Just one location. 214 illegal aliens that came across our southern border thanks to the Biden-Harris administration. Demonstrating strides in making communities safer, yet Democrats in D.C. want ICE removed from cities and restricted from doing their jobs. 214 illegal immigrants arrested for immigration offenses by ICE have been charged or convicted of a sex offense involving a minor. ICE says an arrest is a direct result and a whole of government approach implemented under the current administration that led to the establishment of multi-agency targeting teams in each area of responsibility, bringing together the resources and expertise of the entire federal law enforcement community to confront the overwhelming surge of illegal immigrants that we saw over the past 4 years. As a result, these arrests and removal of historic numbers of violent criminal aliens, transnational gang members, and child sex offenders. ICE enforcement removal operations in Houston, Texas, Acting Field Officer Director Paul McBride said in his statement. Of the 214, ICE highlighted 5 of those arrests were previously deported and allowed back in under the Biden-Harris administration. It is just so, and all they want to do is Trump this and Trump that. No matter how much we expose what Biden-Harris did under 4 years, or didn't do under 4 years, like release the Epstein files, everything's Trump's fault. Trump could come out tomorrow and say he personally found the cure for AIDS, to where nobody can get HIV anymore. It wouldn't matter. We've got the cure for it. And the liberal Democrats would go, oh, isn't that nice? He didn't find the cure for cancer, did he? Whatever it takes to just shit on Trump. That's what they're about. They look the other way when it comes to their own party and the horrible things that took place over the past 4 years. So one of the things that we watched take place since Trump was elected was how the left and the Democrats up in Washington, D.C. went absolutely batshit crazy with Trump's tariffs. All Donald Trump wants to do is make it an even playing field. That's it. Why are we having to pay high tariffs on our goods to be sold in other countries, but in return, we don't charge them the same thing? Why is it so lopsided? That's not fair trade. That's all this was about. Either we pay the same thing or none at all. And the liberals and the Democrats up in Washington, D.C., and the liberal Democrat media went nuts over this, telling you how Trump's going to destroy our economy and crash our country over this. You watched it, we reported on it, everybody did. Oh, how horrible it was. Prices of goods in America are going to skyrocket. You won't be able to afford gas. You can't buy cars. Egg prices are going to go through the roof. Oh, they already were. Everything's going to be just horrible. They painted this freaking shit show that didn't exist. Anybody with any common sense about economics saw right through this shit. But there were some who just gave them a platform to spew their bullshit. Like liberal Democrat, never Trumpster with full-blown TDS, comedian Bill Maher. Well, at least he finally woke up and realized that he was lied to. And he just didn't engage his brain about what was going to happen and believed all the bullshit coming from the left and the Democrats up in Washington, D.C. about these tariffs and how horrible this idea was. As we sit here with the best economy we've had in decades, it's only getting better. He finally admitted that he was wrong about President Donald Trump on tariffs in a podcast that came out yesterday. And he's got to own it because the economy is thriving. Maher made the admission on his Club Random podcast as he explained that he's always truthful with his audience during a conversation with progressive YouTube host Brian Tyler Cohen. Just to take an example, tariffs. Now, I remember that I, along with probably most people, no, most liberals and Democrats in Washington, D.C., that don't know shit about the economy or how tariffs or how trade works, was saying in the beginning, oh no, by the 4th of July, the economy was going to be tanked by then. And I was kind of like, well, that seems right to me, Maher said. But that didn't happen. It could happen tomorrow. I'm just saying that's reality. So let's work first from the reality of that, not from I just hate Donald Trump, because that's boring. It doesn't get us anywhere and leads you to dishonesty. Very true words, sir. Now I know that my liberal friends and Democrat friends are going to go, Bill Maher never said that shit, Doug. What are you talking about? Why do you make this shit up? Yeah, well,
I, along with probably most people, were saying at the beginning, oh, by the 4th of July, somebody had a thing how the country was, the economy was going to be tanked by then. And I was kind of like, well, that seems right to me, but that didn't happen. Now, it could happen tomorrow. I'm just saying that's reality. So let's work first from the reality of that, not from I just hate Donald Trump. Because that's boring and doesn't get us anywhere and leads you to dishonesty. Because the truth is, I don't know what his strategy is. But look, the stock market is at record highs. I know not everybody lives by the stock market, but I also drive around. I don't see a country in a depression at all. I see people out there just living their lives. And I would have thought, and I got to own it, that these tariffs were going to fucking sink this economy by this time, and they didn't. So, how do we deal with that fact? Because that's the fact.
when you have TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome, it doesn't matter what Trump does. It doesn't matter. There could be video evidence of him walking on water like Jesus Christ did. And they would say, Trump can't swim. No matter what Trump does, the left and the Democrats up in Washington, D.C. are going to turn it into something it's not and put all these smoke and mirrors out there about how horrible it is. And they keep doubling down on that as they have since they lost the election. And if they continue the route they're going, midterms will be a slaughter. And I can't wait for that to become reality. North Korea has broke its silence on Trump's return and is sending a message out. They say ties with President Donald Trump aren't hostile, but warns any push to revive denuclearization talks would be futile and insulting. They said North Korea's nuclear arsenal has sharply increased since Trump and Kim last spoke, and the pair would not meet for a summit again if denuclearization was on the table. If the U.S. fails to accept the changed reality and persist in the failed past, the DPRK meeting will remain, and U.S. meeting will remain as a hope of the U.S. side. Kim Yo-jong, the North Korean president's sister, who's now his spokesperson, said. By saying DPRK, she was referring to the nation of its official name, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. She said it would be advisable to seek another way to contact. Trump held 3 unprecedented summits with North Korean leader he dubbed Little Rocket Man during his first term in Singapore in 2018, Hanoi in 2019, and the Korean DMZ in 2019 as well, becoming the first president to step foot on North Korean territory. And if you remember that, that was just the boldest freaking badass move of any president ever, to step over that line into North Korea and stare that little bastard down. Kim Jong-un's comments come after an article posted in their news agency cited an unnamed White House official as saying Trump remains open to engaging with the leader to achieve full denuclearization of North Korea. White House press secretary said last month Trump would like to see progress this term on the summits he held during his first term. And of course, his sister Kim says, we won't even meet with you if that's what you want to talk about. Dear Kim, ask Iran how it worked out for them when they too refused to stop building nuclear weapons, when they too refused to stop threatening to kill us and all Westerners with nuclear weapons. See, little Kim girl, there's a new sheriff in America. And he's not playing stupid games with rogue dictators that are building nuclear weapons and then threatening America and our allies with those nuclear weapons. You're either going to come to an understanding, or maybe, well, just reach out to the Ayatollah in Iran and ask him how far back we set their nuclear program by bombing the living shit out of it. Dumbass. You had many places to be tonight. You chose to be here with me, and for that, I'm forever grateful. Thank you very, very much. If you haven't already done so, whether you're watching me live on YouTube or Rumble or X or Facebook, we are live on the Douglas Ducote Show Facebook page as well now. Please subscribe. Hit the little like button, and also share the channel with your family and friends across your social media platforms. And whatever you're going to be doing tonight, please be safe. If anything breaks of very importance to American patriots between now and Thursday night's show, I will either come out and do something live on it, or I'll do a video about it. Other than that, I hope that whatever you're doing this evening, you're safe, and you watch out for yourself and your family. And as always, please say a prayer for our men and women serving in the United States military, our veterans, our law enforcement officers, our first responders, their families, our angel families, our blue and gold star families, and our country. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless each and every one of you. May God continue to give law enforcement across this globe the strength, the courage, the knowledge, the wisdom that they need to bring an end to sex trafficking of women and children. Good night, my friends, and I'll see you Thursday.